I wanna talk to him. I think he's got things to say. I think he's gotta share his story with the world, and we are definitely the best place for him to do that. However, I'm not gonna come in with kid gloves.
You're gonna hit him with hard-hitting questions?
No, I probably won't hit him with hard-hitting questions.
Welcome to Backtracking, the show where two old friends take a second listen to influential bands' catalogs track by track. I am J. William Hall.
And I'm Dan Fight. We'll be taking this journey together, providing context both historical and personal on some legendary bands. For our second season, we picked none other than pioneering indie rockers American Music Club.
Today on Backtracking. Thanks for coming. We're about to do some sidetracking on Backtracking as we take on Mark Eitzel's first solo album, 1991's Songs of Love Live, recorded on January 17th, 1991, live in London, UK at a club called The Borderline. It was another stopgap release requested by AMC's UK label, Demon Records. And despite the customary complaints from AMC manager Leslie Mallon and Frontier boss Lisa Fancher, it would quickly become Eitzel's biggest seller, generating the first royalties he'd seen in his career. With Eitzel cashing checks, are you ready to snap some necks, Dan?
I sure am, JW. Once again, reviews of the band's 1989 UK-only release were remarkably positive, but positive reviews of the melodies didn't result in band harmony. However, increased critical notice did result in some label interest in the band, and Fancher eventually landed her label a distribution offer from BMG. The deal would allow her to select two of Frontier's bands to get the major label distribution treatment, plus a modest advance. Good news, right? Especially for a band that had received nearly universal critical praise but had suffered from amateurish promotion and distribution. But Leslie Mallon disagreed. She battled with Fancher over deal points large and small. So while Frontier label mates Thin White Rope were able to quickly and easily record and release their album Sackful of Silver under the deal, Mallon's various disputes with Fancher left AMC in the lurch for much of 1990. Eitzel was still writing, however, and the songs showed incredible potential. Tom Mallon wanted to get back into the studio to start work on the band's next record, but Eitzel wasn't so sure. In a Two for Tuesday pairing only the most demented DJ could hook up, Eitzel happened to hear a California-era song, Lonely, on the radio, followed by a Bon Jovi tune. Despite liking his song and the band's performances, Eitzel hated how small the AMC song sounded in comparison. For the next record, a big professional sound was what Eitzel wanted. Dead or alive. That meant eschewing Mallon's studio and its lo-fi equipment, and it also meant a new producer. Nonetheless, Mallon convinced Eitzel to let the band work on some demos in his studio, wagering that Leslie would never sign Fancher's BMG deal and that he'd be recording the next album in the same way as the last three. Mallon was pleased.
But not for long. Up to this point, Eitzel had been playing the role of band peacemaker, smoothing things over when Mallon pissed someone off out of respect for the hard work he'd been putting into AMC for years. But the bloom was off the Mallon rose, and after about a week of work on the demos, a fight between Mallon and Eitzel escalated. Mallon threw the entire band out of the studio and onto the street. This would mark the end of Mallon's time as the band's producer and bass player. Did this mean the band fired Leslie Mallon too? Nay. The band went on another semi-hiatus, while Leslie and Lisa continued to bicker about the BMG contract. Eitzel played gigs with Tim Mooney and the Toiling Midgets and worked in the San Francisco library system. Meanwhile, Demon Records' eternal optimist Spike Hyde once again was faced with the prospect of losing the momentum he'd built up with the UK music press. Never one to give up easily, Hyde hatched the idea of another UK-only release. This time, it would be a live solo set from Eitzel, for which Demon would cover costs and advance Eitzel $5,000. Fancher and Leslie Mallon took a break from beating each other up to shiza on this idea. Fancher wanted Frontier's next release to be the studio album that would become Everclear, while Mallon just seemed to object to different ideas as a reflex. Nonetheless, Eitzel, eager for a trip to the UK, in need of the advance, and just wanting to make something happen, went ahead with the project. The gigs were magical, the UK press was effusive, and the album quickly went on to sell 10,000 copies at release, more than any AMC album to date.
So what else was magical at the dawn of 1991? The World War II occupying powers formally relinquished control in Germany, and Soviet troops withdraw from Poland. Mount Pinatubo erupts in the Philippines, and Nirvana releases Nevermind. And just days before the recording of Songs of Love Live, the US and Allies launched the First Gulf War, about which Eitzel memorably commented, "The Gulf War pisses me off so much. The American government is just so corrupt. But let's talk about me and my career. That's a fucking disaster too." So, Jay William, I just love that quote from Eitzel. It is somehow incredibly earnest, also kind of sad and frustrated, but really, really funny. I just can't imagine being the interviewer who got that quote out of him.
That is, one of the things that he seems to have a special talent for is saying these really sort of self-deprecating, like bitter things, but delivering them in such a sort of charming and or witty, funny
It's
way.
Yeah, it's so true. So I pulled that. That's actually one of the quotes at the beginning of the chapter in Sean Body's book that's about Songs of Love Live. But it really just it made me laugh so much that I decided we had to grab it for the opening of this episode,
Yes.
the episode that is a very special episode, JW, because we are going to be covering the first Mark Eitzel solo LP, Songs of Love Live.
Yes. Now, this is an interesting LP with an interesting backstory. It was not widely available. It was only available in the UK upon release in 1991.
That's right. Yeah, it was released. So it was recorded on January 17th, 1991. And it was released, from what I can tell, in April of 91. Does that match up with your recollection, JW?
I think approximately so, yes.
So the backstory on this album, I think, is just so interesting, right?
Well, before, United Kingdom,
Yeah.
which we covered in the last episode,
Yeah.
that was released in what? That was 89, late
89.
89. Am I correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So we're going to pick up the story with United Kingdom is released. It's
Yep.
only released in the UK.
That's right.
Does very well critically.
Yep.
But is not really a commercial breakthrough in any way.
It would have been hard for it to be a commercial breakthrough, right? Given the limited, I mean, it really was just a UK only release. So, I mean, I don't know what the ceiling is on kind of a, indie American band record sales in the UK at that time, but it's not going to sell 100,000 copies. Let's just say that.
Well, it's definitely safe to say, though, that the UK has embraced them in a way that the US has not yet.
Yeah, certainly the UK critics.
Right. And so, it makes sense that the UK label, Demon Records, Spike Hyde, was like, hey, like things are kind of happening here, and if we don't, keep this thing going, we're going to lose momentum, and so, brilliant idea of his. Hey, let's get Eitzel out here. We'll do a solo live gig, because he'd probably seen him perform, solo at that point and knew that he could bring it.
Yeah.
And and that's what we have here. But in between, before we even get to this live performance in early 91, so the year 1990, it's like that seems to be this sort of like crossroads kind of year for AMC in general. It's like the band's kind of a few members kind of come and go. I think Lisa Davis has to leave.
Yep.
And so there's a period of time after this United Kingdom album where Eitzel gets kind of lured into singing with this other San Francisco band called Toiling Midgets.
That's right. That he had been involved with prior. He had played gigs with them, years prior.
I don't know if years prior. It seems like it was around this time, because I dug into Toiling Midgets a little bit, and they were kind of like, they had been on the scene in San Francisco, and they had kind of started out as this kind of like aggressive. Like they had this singer who sounded like he came from the same sort of like more confrontational punk kind of but also absurdist sort of style as like the Ron Houses of Columbus or whatever. And they had this two guitar attack kind of thing, very post-punk, angular. And so, but the singer was out of the picture for that moment, and so they pulled Eitzel in, and there were Tim Mooney was the drummer of Toiling Midgets at this time.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And so this is the first kind of connection between Eitzel and Mooney. And but you should go check out their album that they record, or there's some demos out there from like early 1990 with Eitzel singing, and then they record this album. It's called Sun, and it came out in 91 on Matador. And this is like this is like bad liquor energy Eitzel.
Yeah.
Over top of this like post-punk kind of guitar attack.
Yeah,
for the most part. But there's also some weird like art rock kind of like they do like a string. Oh, that woman Carla Fabrizio.
Yes. Yeah.
Who played cello on some AMC, like she's in Toiling Midgets, I think. And yeah, so anyway, it's interesting stuff.
Yeah, and in the Sean Body book, they talk a little bit about Toiling Midgets, and they talk to Lisa Davis about Toiling Midgets. And she says kind of after the fact that it was a very unstable band, primarily due to the fact that the I think lead guitarist and original singer, the way she describes it is it was the band was never so much about the music, it was about the rock and roll lifestyle, and they kind of the guitarist and singer kind of led that charge, even though they were at best kind of local rock stars. They really, it was about kind of the rock and roll lifestyle. And she contrasted it to AMC, which she said was always about the music, especially Voodoo and Eitzel. It was always the music was the reason that they were there, and kind of the trappings around the rock and roll lifestyle were really not as attractive to them. I thought that was interesting to hear from her, who, one of the reasons that ultimately they parted ways with her was that she had some apparently substance abuse related health issues that led to her leaving band. In any case, I think that one of the most interesting things about this period of time is it is yet another period of uncertainty for the band, but it seems at this point it is much less about instability within the band itself. Although they do have some personnel changes, it doesn't seem as though there's a lot of big drama around those personnel changes. Instead, they have this incredible drama that exists between their manager and their label, and it's been going for years at this point. And I'm just kind of surprised that they didn't make the decision earlier to somehow fix that situation, or at least try to fix that situation.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, maybe just no one in the band wanted to take that on or whatever. I'm not sure, but like it does feel like this period they're kind of treading water a little bit. And sure what the next step is going to be. And that leads Eitzel to be like, well, fuck it, I'm gonna go sing with Toiling Midgets for a period of time. And he records a whole album with them, and it's definitely like a different side of Eitzel. It is that bad liquor, like $1 million song kind of like side for the most part. But then he also is doing a lot of solo gigging around this time as well. And I found on the YouTubes, I found a live show that he does in mid 1990, where it's just a solo coffee house style kind of gig that he delivers. And it has, a couple sneak previews. It's got some songs that are, coming up here soon kind of thing. And, but it's clear that he's comfortable and has come long, he's able to go out there and do solo gigs, no problem.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. I think one of the other things that I wanted to point out about this kind of interregnum between really between California and Everclear, right? Um, is Spike Hyde comes across as this just irrepressibly optimistic guy. I mean, he clearly absolutely loves American Music Club. He clearly is comfortable dealing with the what seems to be a not small amount of crap that he gets kind of from AMC's management in the form of Leslie Mallon and Lisa Fancher, who doesn't honestly come across, at least in Sean Body's book, as super easy to deal with all of the time. Although, Fancher is undoubtedly a huge American Music Club supporter and a big part of, why they became such an important band. But it just seems like kind of the American side of the American Music Club business is pretty dysfunctional. And yet, Spike Hyde, who isn't even the main guy at Demon Records, really continues to push them in the face of a lot of uncertainty and difficulty in dealing with the American folks.
Oh, here's a question that I have for you.
Yeah.
You're the one who has read the Body book. So how did it come to pass that in this period of time, Mark Eitzel releases his first solo single
Yeah.
for neither Frontier or any Demon or anybody? It's Matador. Like, why
Yeah.
is he releasing a solo single on Matador?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And the book, unfortunately, does not go deep into the answer to that question. It mentions that single very, very briefly. It mentions that it comes off at this time. And then it has some quotes that I'm not going to be able to kind of get perfectly right. But it has some quotes from Eitzel regarding this single where he basically says he hates the recording. And he just wants to sell enough singles to cover the cost of doing the recording in the first place, but he does not seem as though he's a big fan of that version of the song that we're going to talk about, once we actually get into the Songs of Love Live album.
We got so far out, all your waters are tight to take you back ashore. Take courage, take courage. Said the sun, he used to wait for it.
The title of the single is Take Courage.
Yeah.
But that is not the official title of the song, which I think, we now know is Take Courage. But on this single, on the back, it says, on the emblematic use of jewelry as a metaphor for the dissolution of our hopes and dreams.
Yeah.
That is the title of the song that later becomes known as Take Courage. And then the B side is something that I did not hear anywhere else. None of the, there's all these demos that exist during this period of time where Eitzel was pretty prolific and he was writing, quality stuff at a clip. And there's, half a dozen or more unreleased songs from this period that you can find on the demos that are just as good, as stuff that got released. But this song is called, the B-side of this single, The Ecstatic Epiphany, a celebration of youth and beauty, past, present, and future. So both of these songs have these aggressively uncommercial long titles. The liner notes are super self-deprecating. The recording sounds really kind of raw and lo-fi, and there's a ton of reverb. And the B-side is the most shoegazy thing I think that Eitzel ever put out,
Really?
Everyone wants to touch you. Your skin is so soft and pure.
And the artwork I discovered, I did a little digging. It's this hand-drawn thing, this cover that clearly is like a cartoon of Mark Eitzel sitting with his feet in the water of a bay with all this garbage and stuff around him.
Yeah.
But it was done by something called Johnson's Love Novelties. And I discovered that is Brad Johnson, who played
really?
keyboards on The Restless Stranger. So he clearly had like a side thing where he was doing artwork and stuff, and he does the artwork for this. So I bought this single from Eids Records in
Yeah.
Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, for $3.99.
That's
Back in the day.
it is quite a rarity. It is quite a rarity. So I think as we kind of get a little bit closer into covering this album in specificity, I want to kind of pose to you a theory that really kind of came together for me as I was listening to this one, doing notes on it, and simultaneously kind of doing my notes and doing my research into Everclear. I'm gonna, you know, I hate to reference back to season 1 too much, but in case there is anyone out there who's listened to both the Rush season of Backtracking and
Yeah, there are so many ties. There are so many parallels between Rush and American Music Club.
well, I will tell you that here's one that I think I want to try on for size. Rush, I made the argument in that season, and this is not a unique argument within kind of Rush fandom. I think this is the most conventional kind of way to think about the phases of their career. Early, really, for the majority of their career, they had a cadence where they would do 4 studio albums and they would follow it up with a live album. And that live album really served as kind of the bookend at the end of that phase. And then the first album of the next phase, they would really be kind of noticeable changes in the band between, after those live albums. So like the first phase of the band, and I would argue was kind of a primarily a Led Zeppelin influenced phase, and then they move into the very kind of heavy prog rock, Yes, and Genesis influenced phase, and then they go into this like synth pop phase, right, in the 80s. And there's a live album that kind of gives you a good break point between each of those. That is not something I really felt like I would have as strong a sense of with American Music Club. But after listening to United Kingdom, this album, and then Everclear, I really think that this album is the perfect bookend at the end of what I would consider kind of the opening phase of AMC's career, a phase that really shows them kind of finding their sound, right? By the time they get to United Kingdom, I think they've largely coalesced the sound, but it really is a work in progress through this first phase. And then when you get to Everclear, I think you find a band that has a much more clearly coalesced sound that's internally consistent, even across the individual tracks on every album. What would you say to that framework for thinking about AMC's career, JW?
I would say this: you are so full of wisdom about the AMC phases because, well, this is the main thing. Tom Mallon exits the picture.
Right. Huge. I think that's
I mean, I think it's gigantic, and I think that the interesting thing is that if you go out there and you type around on the internets, on the Googles, you'll find there are like live performances of AMC that happen in this period between United Kingdom and Everclear, where they're basically like starting to play the Everclear stuff. Live, but you can hear the difference already. The arrival of Bruce Caffin on pedal steel as like I'm playing on every song guy, like that changes the sound, and suddenly, I mean, it locks into something different. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So this is a good opportunity. I wanted to actually bring up a very, very kind email that we got from a listener named Thomas, all the way from Liverpool.
Tommy,
yes, who was just expressing that he appreciates that there's an AMC podcast out there. Talks a little bit about how he first discovered the band. Right, he's much younger person than either of us. It sounds like he graduated from uni,
Just a wee lad.
uni, as they say in the UK, in 2016, and found his way into AMC through Red House Painters, actually. But one of the things that I found really interesting is that he said that he researched the band and found that, quote, many people consider the Tom Mallon produced albums to be their best work. I, I, I just want to kind of put that to you, JW. Have you heard that before? Is that something that's kind of is that a belief that's commonly held out there in the AMC internet? And how do you feel about it?
It's a complicated question because, like, I do feel like there is a contingent of AMC fans who, they became fans of the band, I think, largely around California.
Yeah.
And so there's something about that sparse kind of like lo-fi kind of sound to it that I think was appealing at that time, because this is the 80s of, even in quote unquote college rock or whatever, you have like bigger and bigger productions and, I don't know. So I think AMC somehow went against that.
Yeah.
And so that made the sort of like a cult thing. And, and when a band achieves that and they become like a cult hit in some way, like that cult is so married to that original vision of the band, and I think that there's a thought that like, oh, in the 90s, as they got on bigger labels and whatever, their production got bigger and they were trying to be more mainstream, but I've also talked to people that they love the 90s albums. They love the sound of those albums. It's like they finally got like deluxe sound and, they created something unique.
Yeah.
And I have not met as many people who say like, I love the reunion period, is my top period. But I haven't talked to a lot of people about AMC in a long time. I mean, that's what this podcast is trying to correct out there, is there have not been enough people talking about AMC for too fucking long.
Yeah, that's right. No, I think that it's interesting. I will say that I hadn't ever heard the argument that the Mallon era albums are the best albums, but I what you're saying, JW, makes perfect sense, and I am certain that there probably are lots of people out there. I have heard some people kind of say that they feel like some of the mid-era albums, and I'm gonna, very loosely, I think we'll probably come back to this when we fully backtrack all these albums, but the mid-era albums I think of as kind of Everclear through San Francisco, more or less.
Yeah.
And and I have heard some people say that they feel as though some of those are overproduced. I personally completely disagree. I love those albums. I love them each differently and to a different amount. But I love that era of the band, and I think one of the things that I like about it isn't so much that isn't so much that I feel like that level of slickness in the production is what puts them over the top for me or anything. It isn't so much that Eitzel's songwriting, I think, really matured up through United Kingdom, and he's really kind of like at the top of his game, beginning with Everclear. Although I think that is also true. I mostly like those albums because I feel like the band congeals in that era in a way that they just don't fully congeal prior to it. And what I mean is, you listen to the Mallon era albums, and it is not infrequent for the songs to feel like they're, I don't want to say they're all good, but they're mostly really good songs, but they frequently don't feel like they belong on the same album together, or maybe even they're the output of the same band. It's a much more varied sound during the first era, and I interpret that in retrospect as the band really trying to find it sound. And I feel like, to a certain extent with United Kingdom, but definitely with Everclear, every song sounds like American Music Club, and every song sounds like belongs next to the song that it's next to on the album, if that makes sense.
So here's the counter argument.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Okay, and I'm not saying that I fully buy this, but this is what I sort of feel as the counter argument to that, is that the imperfection
Yeah.
of the early albums is what makes them more beautiful. You
Mm,
know, like
yeah.
the fact that they are so much more raw, like we're still getting that early era Eitzel where it's really sort of unpredictable and it goes to kind of like crazed places that you're just surprised by. And then there's sort of a smoothing that happens,
Yeah.
as they get kind of like, bigger and bigger labels or whatever. And so I think that there's always going to be like the cool kids are always going to like the early stuff. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
you could name any band. Like you're always gonna have like, the cool kids. I was there first, like I heard them when they, sounded like shit.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. I think I tend to maybe this is maybe this is just a lie, but I tend to like, for bands that I love and I really love the entire catalog, I tend to really like the albums where they're kind of trying to go really big. You know what I mean? I like the big swings, the big production swings, the big slick albums. They don't always work, but I do tend to really like those eras for bands. I think that's um maybe an anomaly with
you know
I don't know.
I mean, the thing about AMC, and I don't want to get into this too deeply because we're going to talk about it when we get to the albums, but like as they get into those 90 albums and the productions do get a little bit more slick and a little bit more kind of big sounding. But, especially in retrospect, like when you listen back to them, like they did it on their terms,
Yeah.
like I'm sure there was some contingent of fans who thought like, oh, they sound, too radio friendly or whatever now. But like those songs are still just as interesting, visual, and, as the earlier songs, but, they just sound in a more kind of broadly palatable
Yeah.
kind of package or whatever.
Yeah.
So big respect, big respect.
Yeah. All right. So do you want to get into this album specifically, or is there more to discuss about the kind of history of the band during this time?
No, I think just to say that like things feel a little loose right now. Things are a little bit at loose ends, like they're not sure what they're doing next.
Yeah.
The band is still rehearsing, the band is still playing. There's a whole bunch of demo rehearsal recordings of the Everclear album basically from late 1990, and there's a live show out there of AMC playing in late 1990 where they're doing kind of half early stuff, half Everclear stuff, and you can tell immediately Caffin is there. He's bringing the pedal steel, like it's up front in the mix, and it's like, okay, this band sounds like something new and different.
Yeah.
So anyway, all of this is setting up for Songs of Love Live, which was recorded January of 91. Eitzel goes and does this solo performance in the UK where he is beloved, clearly, because you
Yeah.
can hear it in the audience, in between songs and whatnot. And it's just him and a guitar, and he kills it.
Yeah. I
I'm
mean,
just gonna say it.
I think the last thing that I wanna mention before we get dive fully into it is I do think it's a little ironic that the Malins wanted to do a live greatest hits album, and the band rejected that idea. Spike Demon, I think, didn't love that idea that much. Lisa Fancher didn't like that idea. It was really just the Malins. So they ended up with this weird hybrid in United Kingdom, which I think in the end is a terrific, terrific album, as we talked about in the last two episodes. But then they turn around and basically that's what Eitzel does with Songs of Love Live, right? It is just a pure live set. He really is playing kind of a greatest hits. There's some new songs on it as well, but it's mostly a greatest hits album from the first era of AMC, and it is live. I mean, this is a live recording. There are a few of these songs are actually recorded live in studio after the gig, but most of it is the recording from the shows at the Borderline.
Yeah, and he fucking kills it. Like, and the
Oh.
audience is gripped. Like, you can hear it
Yeah.
in the recording, and that's what's amazing about this, just as like a document, you know.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think it was really meant to kind of put him out there as like, oh, I've gone solo now.
Yeah. No.
Like, this wasn't meant as like, you know, this is my solo debut or whatever. It's like, you know, I think he just had pent up energy, and this offer came
Yeah.
along, and he was like, all right, because he had already been doing these solo gigs around San Francisco or wherever. And, you know, he brings his A game. There are flubs, there are little chuckles and kind of between song banter and stuff, but it comes across all as like so charming, and the performances are amazing. Like, his vocal performances are great, like
guitar
from song to
playing.
song.
His guitar playing is great, right? And you really don't think of, especially in the early era of the band, you don't really think of him as being more than just kind of a, you know, a serviceable guitar player, right? I mean, that's the way he's described in the early parts of Somebody's book. The other band members don't necessarily realize how good he had gotten on guitar by this point, but you really, you know, he's not up there, you know, Eddie Van Halen-ing, if I can make that a verb, right? But there are some really, really beautiful just guitar moments on this album.
It reminds me of, you know, we did the interview with Greg Bonnell,
Yeah.
and he talked about how, like, when Eitzel came back through Columbus sometime during this period, and Greg was like, wow, when did you start playing guitar like that? Because he was doing
Yeah, that's
all
right.
of the finger picking
Yeah.
kind of stuff. And this album is a showcase for not only that finger picking side. I mean, he does just sort of some strummy sing along stuff here and there,
Yeah.
but yeah, you know, I mean, he's all up and down, and in some ways, it almost reminds me of like a few years before Jeff Buckley. Like,
Oh, yeah.
when Jeff Buckley came on the scene, and he came
Yeah.
on the scene as a coffee house, just
Yeah.
him and a guitar and his vocals going amazing. Like, this is what this album kind of like has that feel to it at times, you know?
Yeah, you know, that is a great connection that I didn't make. But I think you're totally right. There is something about the intimacy of this recording. You really feel like you're in a very small live Mark Eitzel gig. You know, this is not like you don't hear a huge crowd roaring at the end of these songs. I'm guessing there was, you know, couple hundred people at this show. I don't know, but it isn't a huge crowd, and you can hear individual voices calling out requests and stuff in the exact same way that if you listen to the first Jeff Buckley release, which is Live at Chennai, that they've subsequently, it was originally, I think, like a 6-song EP, but they've subsequently, I think, released a version of it as like a double album. But it's where his very famous kind of cover of John Cale's cover of Hallelujah, you know, comes from, and there's all these really, really amazing recordings on that. But one of the things that's so cool about that recording, JW, is like you can hear dishes clanking and stuff on that recording. You really get this feeling that you're sitting in this little coffee shop and there's this dude in the corner just, you know, going off, but like it's almost kind of weirdly, embarrassingly intimate, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I mean, and Eitzel, I mean, that's his whole thing, is like it's so intimate that it's uncomfortable at times, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
But totally captivating, and you know, not only like this recording captures how captivating it is just with the audio. Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't even need, you know, but it has this great cover photo
Yeah.
of him mid performance really emoting,
Yeah.
you know, and it just like it works with any moment on the recording. You're just like, there he is, like that's him singing this at this moment, and he just looks so into it, you know.
Yeah. Now it's good that you brought up the cover. This was not his original choice for the cover of the album. There was
Oh,
yeah, so originally the album, he wanted, there's a photo, I'm quickly looking through the Sean Body book here. There was a photo of a woman in a phone booth. Is kind of what I remember from reading this, that he wanted on the cover, and they couldn't clear the photo. And so this photo, it happened to have been a photo that somebody took at the event where they recorded this. And so they just kind of last minute slapped this on it. But there was also an alternative title for the album that was much more like these kind of very long, wordy song titles that he's getting into. You had mentioned the title that he used for Take Courage on the Matador single. And obviously, on Everclear, he starts to get into more titles like that. But it originally had a title that was kind of like that. And I guess for whatever reason, they didn't get the photo, and they just simplified everything. But I agree. I mean, I think that there's something about the directness of like him just singing live, emoting. The name of the album, I think, is like, it's just kind of perfect. It's just very direct. It's kind of, it is what it is, and it delivers exactly what kind of the cover and the title promise.
And I think coming off of the AMC studio albums, like, because I think fans of the band, probably many of them were people who had seen them perform live. And so they had seen, Eitzel's performance, and that had been part of what they kind of fell in love with.
Yeah.
And, and so the studio albums have attempted to rein that in, to some extent. And so this is the first sort of recording that people are getting where they're like, oh, that's what it was like, when he performed live, like you were so, captivated by it.
Yeah. Yeah. So do you want to, let's just go through the basics here. This is the album runtime, 45 minutes. We're not going to go through.
Hey, that's perfect for one side of a 90-minute cassette, y'all.
Yeah, it is. I mean, this really is, well, we can talk about that in a bit, but it's an interesting, I could advocate at this being the first listen for someone wanting to get into American Music Club. I'm not certain that this is the right choice, but I think it is. It's not a wrong choice.
If you want to hear Eitzel's songwriting,
yeah,
like up, front and center, I mean, it is the best first choice.
Yeah, it is. It's a pretty remarkable album. So, but let's just go through the track list. We're not going to go through every single song, but I'll go through the track list first, and then JW, we can hit on the individual songs as we see fit. So, Firefly, Chanel No. 5, Western Sky, Blue and Gray Shirt, Gary's Song, Outside This Bar, Last Harbor, Kathleen, Crabwalk, Jenny, Take Courage, and Nothing Can Bring Me Down. So,
also Room Above the Club in there. I think you skipped that one. That was before.
There was Room Above the Club. How did I screw that up?
So in a way, like if you look at this track listing, you've got basically like a few songs from each of the AMC albums up to this point, as well as a handful of completely new songs.
That's right. So maybe let's just kind of quickly run through some of these songs. We'll do an abbreviated track by track. Many of these songs we've covered on episodes for the various earlier albums.
Come on, beautiful. We'll go sit on the fire and watch the fireflies as the sun goes down.
So Firefly, obviously Firefly, it's the opening track off of California, done acoustic here. One of my favorite things about this, and I'm just going to throw it out there, see what you think about this, JW. He does this really pretty in this kind of in the bridge that follows the I guess it follows the chorus. It's like a little bit of a guitar breakdown, and he does this really nice like harmonic thing on it. Did you hear that?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's really pretty, and it's just kind of. He also has this charming moment in that where the first time he plays it, he like screws it up, and then he and then he comments, he's like, I'm always fucking this part up. But it
Mhm.
kind of really brings you into the performance, and it's such a pretty little encapsulation of how much different this song sounds solo acoustic than it does as a band number.
Yeah, I mean, if you were a fan of AMC up to this point and hearing this minus the band, it is a little bit of a revelation because it's like, the songs become something a little bit different when he does them solo.
Yeah.
And the little part in the middle where he starts and he messes up and he says, "Oh, I'm always fucking this part up," and he laughs, and it's so humanizing.
Yeah.
And it just like, and then he really goes big at the end, and he brings like his big
Yeah.
Springsteen, size voice, and man, it commands the room,
Yeah, and I think it comes across as a sadder song live than it does in the band version.
Yeah, I would say that that's true. It does have a sadder edge to it here.
He doesn't slow it down. Though there are a couple of points when he sings almost a harmony to what the album version of the vocal line is. But he doesn't change the song really all that much, but there's just something about his delivery, especially of the last verse, time to finish a prayer that started as a kiss, the overwhelming dream of happiness, that verse. There's something about his delivery of it that really is like kind of a gut punch on this version of the song.
Yeah, I mean that's the quality of his voice, that comes across as like it's so emotive that it really is like you're just gripped with like what he's feeling, as he's singing those lines, and and I think that is what's on display, on this album, is just like what an amazing live performer he is.
Yeah. Now, one thing that I would like to kind of, are you ready to move on for Firefly? Because I'm super excited to talk about Chanel number 5. So
yeah,
before we get into this one though, Chanel number 5, it does not appear on any full length AMC album ever.
Right.
Correct? It appears as a B-side on the Rise single, I believe. Is that correct?
That is correct. The Rise EP.
Yeah, so there's a Rise EP that's released, right. I'm assuming right around the time that Everclear releases. JW, I don't want to call it too early. We're going to have a big tournament of champions at the end of this season where we each determine our favorite AMC albums, our favorite AMC songs, okay? However, I am going to tell you that Chanel number 5 is without a doubt a contender for my favorite AMC song, period.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, I have always loved this song. It is just, I think, one of his best compositions. But I will say that I don't like this acoustic version anywhere close to as much as I like the version that appears on the Rise EP.
I do like this version. It's different, than the Rise EP. Probably gun to my head, I would pick the Rise EP one as well. But this one is a great version, and I think it's super, it's kind of bold. It's like, we're putting this live album out that's kind of an overview of your songwriting history, and you're putting a new song second.
Yeah.
Like that's how much confidence he had in this song at this time, and well deserved, because it is a great composition. Like it's fully realized,
Yeah, I just think that it, when hearing the difference, we just got finished talking about Firefly. I think Firefly is a song where, if I kind of gun to my head was asked to pick, do I like the California version of the song better than the Songs of Love live version, or vice versa, I probably would say I like the Songs of Love live version better. But I feel the exact opposite about Chanel number 5, right? I like them both. I love the song, absolutely love the song. But I think the band version of Chanel number 5 really, the band manages to pull something out of the song that just isn't present when it's their solo. It is so moody. It is so atmospheric. It's just so beautiful. Whereas Firefly, they certainly crafted into a little bit more of a pop gem than what is here on Songs of Love Live. But there is a certain raw kind of emotiveness in the solo acoustic version that appears here that I really like.
You're entitled to your opinion.
Okay, well, fair enough. You disagree, but Chanel number 5, I think, is wonderful, and I will never hear the song without, of course, thinking about the. There was an interview disc that we had back at WDB 91.1 FM in Granville. The doobie.
Yes.
Don't ask the doobie, but I will never forget there were little clips of interviews before each song on it, and I'll never forget the clip that appeared before Chanel number 5.
I remember part of it.
Okay.
Yeah, because it was like taken from an interview with Eitzel.
Yeah.
And he says something like, she has a black eye. I'm going to fuck it up.
He was running. He was following. She didn't look very happy, and neither did he. She had one black eye, and he looked like he was about to give her another one.
That's it. You nailed it. The one thing that I want to say about like this album is that, Demon Records, the way that they, the way they packaged this album, they were already treating Eitzel like an esteemed songwriter. You know what I mean? Like, because I have the CD of this Songs of Love Live, and they have a whole big write-up of the gig.
Yeah.
On the back, like this glowing review of the gig. And
Yeah.
then inside they have about the songs, and they had Eitzel go through each song and say, a couple sentences about each one. And so, it's interesting to get his insight, and it's self-deprecating and kind of charming, at times to read through it. But yeah, so he says that this song is about, quote, a whore.
Yeah.
But it's so dialed in on a mood.
Yeah.
And and it definitely feels like it's like he's still elevating, his songwriting at this point.
Yeah. Yeah. It's yeah, he had moved into kind of during this interregnum between United Kingdom and Everclear. He within the book, it talks about him moving into the Mission in San Francisco, and this apartment that he had on I believe Cap Street, if my memory is correct. And it just kind of talks about the crime and kind of poverty that existed in that part of the city at that time, and how he had apparently had a very sunny apartment, and a window that kind of looked out onto the street, and there was always a lot of kind of crime and ne'er-do-wells and people out, junkies and prostitutes and all kinds of people out, gang members out on the street. And this song is very much kind of written about the women that would work on the street outside of his apartment. And in some of the interviews and like quotes about it, it seems a little bit more, I don't know, somehow dismissive. But when you really listen to the lyrics of this song, it is an extremely feeling and caring and kind of like beautiful portrait of these kind of these women that work. It is like a classic beautiful loser motif, right? But really,
I mean, this is sort of, this is picking up where, like, he's already written certain songs that have been definitely these sympathetic portraits of barflies.
Yeah.
And this is, something where this is a sympathetic lyric, about women who are in this situation, this profession.
Yeah. Western Sky is third. This is a beautiful version of Western Sky.
Yes.
And then he moves on to Blue and Gray Shirt. I don't want to go too deeply into either of these two versions myself, although I certainly invite you to do so. I think they are both absolutely beautiful versions, but they're not substantially different than what you hear on the various albums they show up on. At least they aren't to
Yeah,
me.
I think they kind of more or less, you know, evoke the same vibe. It's this like beautifully weary.
Yeah.
You know, at the end of Western Sky, he seems to almost like, it sounds like he almost like breaks down a little bit, you know, like
Yeah.
um and you know, Blue and Gray Shirt has got this beautiful finger picking like kind of going, and this is, and he mentions this in the liner notes about Nick Drake. You know, he
Yeah.
references Nick Drake and sort of talks about, and so clearly like these two songs are from that kind of angle for him.
Yeah. I think in particular Blue and Gray Shirt is rendered beautifully on this album.
Mhm.
I like the version of Western Sky. I think both of these are really, really strong. And these, you know, I think throughout his career, the impression that I have is that these two songs are pretty much staples. These are songs that, you know, are kind of fan favorites.
Oh yeah, these are definitely part of the canon.
The canon. That's a good way to put it. So a song that is not part of the canon, and I actually think is worth a little bit of discussion in here, is Gary's song.
Yeah.
That's the fifth track. It is an interesting inclusion in this set, I thought.
Yeah, I mean, especially coming off the last couple of songs, like this one is almost like a palate cleanser type of thing. You know, it's got more of like a strummy, sing along type of vibe to it. You know, I think he, you know, he brings a little more of the Springsteenian energy on this one.
Totally.
You know,
Totally.
but you know, the one thing about this album that, you know, I think is so cool is like, he has to entertain an audience, just him and a guitar, for 45 minutes.
Yeah.
You know? And so he's got to switch it up a little bit here and there. And I think this is an example of how, like, you know, he just did these like really like soft finger picky, and now he's going to do kind of like a strummy sing along. And it's just like, you know, it's just a change of pace kind of thing.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I find interesting about this song on this album is it really gives you a sense of how far he and the band take these songs when they work on them together. Not all of them, right? Certainly Blue and Gray Shirt, Western Sky, Firefly. You can kind of feel the bones are there already. Gary's song, I don't really have that sense, right? It is undeniably the same song, right? It is completely recognizable, and it isn't even as though he's doing it in a substantially different tempo or anything. But the feel of the version of Gary's song that's on Songs of Love Live is much more plaintive, and much less kind of joyously drunken. You know, I think that one of the great things about the album version of Gary's song is it has this really, I mean, the music feels like stumbling around a bar drunkenly. But in a fun way, you know what I mean? Like a fun, it isn't like a crying in your beer kind of drunkenness. It's like a fun, let's go dance, turn on the jukebox.
Yeah.
Like, you know, maybe I'm going to bump somebody and spill some beer, but like it's a party song kind of. But lyrically, there is a little bit of darkness in it. But it really, that's a place on the album version. And you get a sense of the version that's on Songs of Love Live. It's like, oh God, okay, I get it. This is kind of where it started, and that album version, the band version, is kind of where it finished.
Yeah, I mean, the band version is perfect because the song is about drinking with your friend.
Yeah.
And so it's a drunken camaraderie kind of song. And so on the band version, you got the 3-part harmonies, and like, you know, it all adds to the atmosphere of it. This version is sort of like the like lonely morning after, you know, like contemplative, sad, you know what I mean? Like this gets at the heart of the sadness of the song, which is, you know, we drink too much, basically. Like, and he expounds upon this a little bit in the liner notes. One thing that he says is, you never have to admit why you are the only one in the world that can see a particular problem in someone else. When creatures stop evolving, then they overspecialize. Yes. Anyway, basically it's about drinking too much, and
Yeah,
it's kind of a bad thing,
yeah, yeah. Um, okay, so outside this bar, this is another interesting take on a song, and my impression, really, we should probably talk about outside this bar and room above the club i- as a piece in some ways, or at least maybe that's the way I'll throw it out there, and I'll see how you react to that. But outside,
Well, the only reason I would object is because on the original vinyl pressing of this album, Outside This Bar is the end of side A, Room
oh,
Above the
okay,
Club is the beginning of side B.
okay, well
So
that
in some ways it ties the two sides together.
okay, okay. So outside this bar, as we've talked about in the previous episodes, outside this bar, written about San Francisco or a Columbus, Ohio bar, which was called
Uh
J-
Andy's Pub.
Andy's Pub, and Room Above the Club, also written about room above a bar, a punk bar in Columbus, Ohio. So these songs, if not written at kind of the same time, they certainly reference the same era in his life, and I do feel like, from a content perspective, from a lyrical perspective, they're kind of sister songs in some ways. Um, I also think these two songs are the songs that feel, to me anyway, the hardest to translate into solo acoustic. He does interesting things with each of them. Outside this bar tends to be, or at least my interpretation of this, this is really much more of a platform for like Eitzel, the performer, Eitzel, the maybe Springsteenian performer, to a certain extent. But this really is a platform for him to kind of emote on this album. And then Room Above the Club, obviously, he does totally a cappella, which is a very different experience, but also, I think, really heavily performance based. And so songs that are kind of sort of rockers on the albums, um, have a very, very different feel here. What do you think about that, JW?
I agree. The thing about Outside This Bar that he does is he changes lyrics, like entire, sections of the original song, particularly for Outside This Bar. The original recorded version, the closing line, turn the volume down to silence. Together we'll turn this love into violence.
Yeah.
On this version, he says, you and I, we both know there's nothing good outside that door. Can you tell me what you're leaving here for? So he changes the ending of the story, basically.
Yeah.
And both versions are good. So it's like he's still kind of like tinkering with songs and changing the melodies here and there and changing the way he delivers lines and stuff like that. And yeah, I mean, this is a showcase for him as a performer. This is going back to his early, Billy Joe Buckeye kind of days, just him and a guitar and a mic.
Yeah. 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 I think definitely worth listening to. Interesting moments on the album. Definitely feels like, to a certain extent, from an energy perspective, probably a high point in the set, although I don't actually know what order these songs were played live. But it's definitely interesting, varied versions of songs that just feel very different on the albums. Now, the 8th song on this album is Last Harbor. And again, I think just so achingly beautiful. He goes from kind of Room Above the Club, Get Your Attention, sings this thing, a cappella. It's pretty kind of in your face.
I have to point out, and this is just a total nerd thing, but like I noticed on the because this was a UK only release, they spelled harbor HARBOUR.
That's right. Yeah.
In the lesson on the track listing, but on the original, of course, it was the American spelling. So anyway, just nerding out. Come on now.
I noticed that as well. I noticed that as well. But the version of Last Harbor, I think, is just a very, very beautiful, like sedate, quiet, intimate version of this song.
Yeah, I mean, again, like this is like a part of the early Eitzel canon, and he kills it. I mean, he just delivers like a achingly beautiful version of the song.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so Kathleen been in the set for a while. Generally a pretty high energy performance when done live. It tends to be an emotional high point, I guess, in his performance. What did you think about this track on the album?
I mean, he goes for it. Like, I mean, this one especially, it has that moment like near the end of the song where, your love, Kathleen, is for someone that I swear I could have been. And then he says it the second time and he goes up big.
Yeah.
And I've heard versions where he, I'm not going to say chickens out because like that, you got to go, but like in this version, I mean, he hits it, and, and this is another, it's this like spectral finger picking. It's almost this like tone poem kind of thing. It's not like a song, in a way. So I think it's great. And, the other thing is, I don't know if it's before or after this song, but you start to hear people in the audience. You start to hear these like British dudes, Animal Pen. Here's the guy, Animal Pen. Laughing Stock, So it's just funny. Like, I remember when I heard this album for the first time, because I think this caught me by surprise. I was at the Cool Record store in Pittsburgh, Eids, and I probably saw it and was like, oh my God, what's this? And it was like an import, so I bought it. And so just like from an American perspective, like to hear, like, it's like, oh, dude, like he's in London playing this gig, like he's made it, like he's a huge star, and it's just funny, like in retrospect, it's like, oh, they were struggling during this period. All right, so the next song is the public introduction of a new title in the Eitzel songbook called Crabwalk.
Yeah, it is. And I think that Crabwalk is, when you think about the songs that show up on the next album, I don't know how many of them have been written. Again, Crabwalk is kind of an interesting choice here. It's most analogous, I think, to Gary's song, right?
Right. But, the thing that I think it does is because this is a live performance, and because he's trying to find kind of like different buttons to push and different types of songs to play to put together performance that he can hold an audience for 45 minutes. Like, so this touches a different thing. It's got the a cappella kind of stomp along at the beginning, and then it turns into just a strummy kind of like sing-along thing for the chorus. And, it's just a different vibe. It's not as heavy or as like, soft and sad, as a number of the previous songs have been. So I think it's a great choice for like a live performance like this.
Yeah, and I've got to say that of the, when you think about the, Roadhouse AMC songs, right? And you know what I mean when I say Roadhouse. Yeah. I mean Patrick Swayze. I mean that. Who is that?
Yeah, fist fights and like the band's playing behind the fence, the chain link fence. Yes,
with the blind blues guitar player. What's that guy's name? Remember that? Remember that guy's name?
Yes. Oh fuck. Jay.
It's called Angel Eyes, and I feel like all of the songs were
like blind blues. Yeah.
He's like keeping that jam going while Sam Elliott and fucking Patrick Swayze are going to work. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, totally. I mean, professional. Like the bottles are flying, glass is just shattering through the chain link fence, and he's just like still just keeps it going.
That's right. So I think of Crabwalk as that version of AMC. If there were a universe where AMC were behind that fence in the movie Roadhouse.
You know what? Like retrospectively, they should have made a fucking video for something like Crabwalk where they were in like a Roadhouse style. They're the band playing Crabwalk in the back. Like that would have.
It actually would have been funny if it would have been all the shots from Roadhouse. They actually just did all of it, but then whenever it cut to like the band behind the fence, it was them. You know what I mean? And like, there's like beers, man. They're like,
Yes.
that would be perfect.
Coulda, woulda, shoulda.
That's right. That's right. Well, no, but I think of like when I think about the Roadhouse AMC, Crabwalk is probably my favorite of those songs. Well, I don't want to skip too far ahead. Unless you were to say that Royal Cafe is one of those songs, I would argue it probably isn't. I think of that as a different kind of a song, but I love the song Crabwalk. I like the version. I like the version on here, but it's for me, it's a nice break in the live set. I would agree with what you said there, but this is not my favorite version of the song that appears in their catalog.
I would agree, and this is the first of 3 versions of this song that appear in the next year. So, this is sort of like the introduction to it, and it's kind of like, all right, it doesn't sound. I think because of the acapella verses, it sounds a little more like it's not finished or something. And, but it's interesting. Like, I mean, if you're following in real time and you're a fan and it's like, there's some unreleased songs, on this live album, and this is one of them. So that's cool.
We're not ready to call the mid-era art of love, though, are we?
What's that?
We're not ready to call this song the mid-era art of love, are we?
Oh, no. I don't think Crabwalk is as, they had a couple of songs in those early albums, Art of Love, and, that could get a little grating, I think, like, they were abrasive in some way.
Yeah.
Crabwalk's not. Like, Crabwalk's fun,
Yeah,
and it does, it showcases a different side. It still ties into the whole AMC aesthetic because it's centered around a barfly, but it's like a fun/funny side of it, and it's refreshing. So it's like a fizzy beverage mid set.
It is. What is the British lemon beverage that they drink? It's like a
the scurvy killer. The oldie scurvy killer.
Isn't it called bitter lemon? What's it called?
I don't
lived
know.
In the UK. You worked for the National Health Service, didn't you?
I didn't have 2 Fennigs to rub together to fucking go out and buy mixed lemon. I didn't know what no, like I was lucky if I got a pint of fucking, I don't know, some swill at the fucking Outside Inn in Neasden.
That's what it was called, the Outside Inn.
The Outside Inn, that was the local pub of that little era. Yeah. But anyway, enough about me. So the next song, shall we move on?
Yeah.
Shall we get to the next song? It's a very faithful rendition of a song from the California album, Jenny.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful version on here. And I think that this really is the first tune in a 3-song set that just builds on itself. I mean, he goes from strength to strength to end this album, and I think Jenny is really the beginning of that.
Yeah, I mean, this album across the board, like, I don't know how you could hear it and be like, oh, this guy's not a good songwriter. Like,
I mean, it's unbelievable.
Each song is its own kind of unique little thing, and I mean, this sort of picks up with the finger-picky kind of that mode of some of the previous stuff, but lovely, as they say in the UK.
I think this is a beautiful version of Jenny, but I want to talk about Take Courage, because Take Courage, I think, we talked a little bit about the single. This is the Songs of Love live version is an incredibly intimate, quiet, beautiful, beautiful version of the song. I think I've already come out and said I think Chanel Number 5 is one of my favorite American Music Club songs, period. I think that Take Courage is an absolute lost gem. I think this is one of his most beautiful. I can understand why the band never took this on because it's tough. Yeah, I listen. I'm not acting like I would know more than them. I certainly wouldn't. But when I listen to this song, it's hard for me to imagine what a band version of this song might be. But I think the solo acoustic version of this song is just so goddamn beautiful.
I do think that there were sort of a category of songs that came to light, especially during this period where he is playing like solo acoustic stuff and he's introducing these songs that as solo acoustic pieces are already so strong that the band, what can they do with it?
Yeah.
And I think that they tried, like on some of these albums that are coming up, they tried to kind of do band versions, and I think it was like mixed results, because sometimes that solo acoustic delivery of it was just perfect, and you couldn't improve it. So Take Courage, I think, is one of those songs, and this version is, I think, stronger than the version that was on the Matador single. But here's my question. So in the liner notes for this album, it says that tracks B6 and B7 are studio demos, is what it says. That would include this song and the next song. But the way that they mixed it, they mixed the crowd noise going, and then it like mixes into the beginning of Take Courage. And so I'm like, is it, because it is, I mean, it sounds like the guitar and everything sounds the same. So it's like whatever setup they did for the studio recordings must have been close to identical to the live thing. But so that's my one question. But the other like great thing about this song, especially for like a British only kind of release, is that it's sort of sprung from his memory of this particular billboard that he used to see in Britain when he was living there as a child. It said "Take Courage," but it was a beer advertisement.
Yeah. And the story that's articulated in the book is I don't know how much of this comes directly from Eitzel, whether there's some Sean Body kind of like narrative mixed in here or what, but it's a really, really kind of beautiful and sad kind of overlay for these lyrics. He talked about when he's a little boy, very little boy, because his family left the UK when he was quite young. But he would be taking the bus to school, not wanting to go to school, feeling like an outcast, feeling like, he was basically afraid of school. And every day he'd wait to pass this Take Courage sign that was on a pub. And he'd like, kind of like take this as like encouragement for him going to school. Like, be brave, you're going to school, it's going to be fine. And then the fact that, and so like, that's the story that appears in the book behind these lyrics. But then you actually read the lyrics, especially that last line when he says, and I realized it was just a warning.
Yes. What a gut punch of a last line. Like, I mean, that's brutal.
Yeah. But I will tell you that this has long been one of my favorite Eitzel recordings, this song. And for every time I've been to the UK since I started listening to American Music Club and Mark Eitzel, I always looked for Courage beer signs simply because I wanted to see these Take Courage signs. It's such a dorky thing to do, but like every time I've been there, it's funny in the book he also says like, and now that I'm an adult, I find courage to be undrinkable swill or something. Is what he said. Which
and I was in the UK in 6 months, 95, 96, and I don't remember like drinking courage, like whatever it was, you know. So I don't know if like it had already become kind of like it wasn't really advertised like that anymore or something, but or maybe I just, you know, didn't notice because I
Yeah.
was whatever.
Yeah, because you didn't have, what did you say, two Fenrir?
I didn't have two Fennings to you know.
Fenning? What's a Fenning? I thought it was a, what's a Fenning? Is it like a halfpenny or a
Isn't a
nickelby?
isn't a Fenning like an old like penny, like a
I honestly don't
British
know.
penny?
Well, you know, maybe the listener from Liverpool can let us know. Um, because I don't know, but all right,
I
so
have
we
to
get
look it up. I
so
gotta
we
know. I gotta know if I'm gonna. Oh fuck! It's a German coin. Sorry, I got. Never mind. I didn't have two
so
pounds. 2 pounds.
um so the last song on this album, Nothing Can Bring Me Down, as a
Yeah.
composition had been floating around for a while for him. And I guess probably reaches its final form. I believe the song is called What Godzilla Said to God When He Found His Name Was Not Written in the Book of Life, is the title that Eitzel eventually goes with. Um, this is an absolute classic in my mind. I love this song. And I absolutely love the performance on here. It is so like gentle. It's almost whispered, and it's so plaintive, and the lyrics are just so beautiful. I love this song.
Yeah, I mean, this is an example of a song that the band did try to take
Yeah.
kind of his solo acoustic version and do a band version of it. Admirable job, but I
Yeah.
think that this was a song that is most devastating as a solo delivered piece, like it is here. And you know, especially when, you know, I mean, the title implies that like, hey, nothing can bring me down. It sounds like a song of hope, but
Yeah.
you know, when you like read into the lyrics and stuff, it's basically like I'm already at rock bottom. Like nothing can
Yeah.
bring me down
Yeah.
anymore because I'm already at rock bottom. You know, and I mean, you know, you feel it, you fucking feel it.
Yeah. It's a beautiful composition. I will say I love the band version of this song and I love this solo version, but they have a very different feel. Each has a very different
Yeah.
feel. I would agree with you. I think that the solo acoustic version is just devastating. It's just really, really beautiful. The band version is almost catchy. It's difficult to put your finger on it. We'll talk about it when we cover the album in detail, but it's a really, really interesting juxtaposition. I think that as we kind of get to the end of the track listing on this album, this is really one of the things that I love about this album so much. You mentioned it a little bit earlier. You listen to the full band albums, you know, really, I think, can appreciate what an incredible songwriter Mark Eitzel is. And you can appreciate how much he grows over the course of the first 4 full-length studio albums, right? But this album somehow exposes you to like another side of him as a songwriter. And when you strip away what is an equally great part of the band, that kind of atmosphere, you know, when they get it right, this kind of atmospheric, landscaptual, I think a very wise man once called it. This thing that they do, this kind of soundtrack. Yeah, very landscaptual. Um, that's amazing. That's a great, important part of American Music Club. But this album really kind of strips all of that away and forces you to just listen to the songs for the songs, you know, on their own merits, and really kind of shows you what the various people who kind of fell in love with Eitzel as an individual musician early in his career, and there's a long list, right? Tom Allen, Lisa Fancher, Voodie, right? These are all people who at various points kind of threw themselves behind Eitzel with this incredible belief, and you know, really it seemed like worked on his behalf pretty heavily. sympathy. It helps you understand in the right setting how, what a transformative experience it could be to see him and hear him play.
Now, my understanding is, and maybe the book gets into this a little more, is that, like, I mean, obviously, you know, he had bad nights. Like
Yeah.
there were times where, performances kind of fell apart or songs fell apart or, so I don't know the story of this album in terms of, if they recorded multiple nights and then stitched it together. It doesn't sound like it. I mean, if they did edit it together, they did a good job. And I will give a tip of the cop to Mr. Paul Riley, who is credited on this album for mixing and editing. And I clicked on Paul Riley on Discogs, and I discovered that he had been a bass player in a pub rock band in the 70s called Chili Willy and the Red Hot Peppers. And I was like, oh, fuck. They must have been so fucking pissed off, like, in the 80s when the Red Hot Chili Peppers came along and, like, became, like, huge international, Chili Willy and the Red Hot Peppers. Like that, oh, what bad fucking timing. And so anyway, so this guy went on he mixed and edited this album. And so I don't know if it was one continuous performance or what it was, but, good job. Jolly good.
Yeah.
Jolly good.
Definitely a great job. I mean, this is really a terrific live recording. I really appreciate what you pointed out that had never occurred to me before. That similarity with Jeff Buckley Live Janae. It is a very similar vibe, actually. The recording itself and the intimacy of the recording. It's pretty great. So JW.
Yeah.
It's fine. We've covered this album in a single episode. We decided to do that because we've talked about many of these songs before. But that is not going to free you from your responsibility as a podcaster and as an American. Fuck. It is to select the worst song on this album and to defend your choice. Jay William, please proceed.
Fuck me. Good Lord. I'm going to tell you, like, it is really fucking hard to pick what I would consider the worst song on this album, because I think every song on this album is compelling in its own way. I will say the a cappella version of Room Above the Club, I think maybe it goes on for like one verse too many,
Yeah.
So I'm going to go with that. It would have been the opening to side B. I don't know.
Okay. I appreciate that pick. Unfortunately, it's incorrect. I understand why you might have picked it. I understand why the amateur might pick that song. However, the reason that isn't the worst song on the album is because it is a cappella, and it shows you a different side of him as a live performer that I think is a valuable inclusion on this album. Therefore, you are wrong, Jay William. I'm sorry. No points for you.
I am duly chastened.
the correct worst song on the album is, of course, and I don't say this with any relish at all, it is Blue and Gray Shirt. And I'm going to tell you why it's Blue and Gray Shirt.
What?
I'm going to tell you why. Yeah.
Oh.
No, it is a beautiful Blue and Gray Shirt is I believe I selected that as my favorite song on that album. Here's why I'm going to pick it as the worst one on here. It's because I feel like it is a fundamentally similar performance to what is captured in the studio. And I think that the studio version, with the light sprinkling of instrumentation from the other band members, is perfection. And so I'm gonna say that that's the worst song on this album. I know it's controversial. I could have picked Gary's song. I don't love this version of Gary's song.
Basically, you wish he had changed it up more. You wish he'd have been like, I sat up all morning with a red and pink shirt on, you know.
I listen, it's a difficult choice. I would agree. I think there's so many great songs on this album. I easily could have picked Gary's song as my least favorite here, but anyway, why don't we move on? Because this is what really the people want to hear. The best song on this album. What is it, JW?
I have, this has been the single most, I've struggled with this question more on each of the albums, and I end up defaulting to the first song on the album every time, because I feel like that's gripping enough to pull you into, you know, the world of the album or whatever. And, you know, I don't want to be lazy because, you know, there are so many great performances here. Fuck.
Yeah. Tough.
Maybe I'll go with Chanel number 5. I don't know.
Yeah,
I feel like I'm copping out a little bit.
Yeah, I feel like you are copping out a little bit. I would agree with that.
You know what? Fuck it. No, I'm just gonna do it. First song on the album, Firefly. This is the introduction. Yes, this is the introduction to the performance, and it's so compelling. And he takes the song from the album to different places, you know, and for, you know, this was more or less the single from California. So this is the song that probably the audience is like most
familiar with.
Right, you know, and so, you know, and he has the flub in the middle, and he kind of laughs, and it sort of sets the tone for the whole performance. So like, I'm gonna go with the first song on the fucking album, Firefly. Same pick. Well, I think on California I might have picked it. I forget. I don't remember what I picked.
Well, you know what? You're gonna have to get your shit locked up tight, my friend, because we've got a Tournament of Champions you're gonna have to run. That is a double elim bracket, and you can't just, you know, go into that with fucking sucking on a lollipop. You know,
we are going.
You come in ready to play.
Listen, you think the AMC season of Backtracking is already too fucking long? Get ready for the fucking tournament, because I'm going to extend this motherfucker for so goddamn... I'm not going to be able to decide anything in the first round. It's going to be like, you know, March Madness or whatever, and there's like, you know, bracket fucking number seeds 16 playing what, you know, and I'm going to be like, I don't know. I can't decide.
I'm telling you, it's tough. You've got to decide. That's the problem. You have to decide. There is no way out. The only way out is through Jay William. So I've heard your pick of Firefly.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate it, but I have to say, wrong again. Wrong again, Jay William. You got it wrong.
I knew it.
This one, really, there are two possible choices here. There are a million great songs on this album. Nothing but great songs on this album, but there are two choices.
Not a million.
There are two choices to make for the
Don
best.
Jr. over here. A million picks on this album. No.
I came in, I looked around, all the songs were great. I said, look at all these songs are great. And everybody said, look at these are all great songs. So
this is American Music Club.
I will tell you, there are two possible choices. Choice number one is Take Courage. Absolute beauty. The second choice, Nothing Can Bring Me Down. I am going to select, I'm going to share with you in the audience, the best song on this is Nothing Can Bring Me Down. Wow. It is an amazing album ender. I love Take Courage. Take Courage is an absolutely beautiful song. This is really, I think, the best version of the song that you can find across all the recordings. But I think Nothing Can Bring Me Down on here is just so beautiful.
Lovely. It's lovely. It's a lovely song.
Lovely. All right, so Jay William, we've done it again. Yeah. We've delighted America with our discussion of Mark Eitzel's Songs of Love live next week. We're going to be back.
We're also delighting the UK.
That's right. The UK.
We're also delighting Deutschland.
Yeah, always. Though I have not seen Deutschland in the match I will go back to the data analytics team and ask them to dig deep and see if we've got any upload dashboards for. Yeah.
Look again. Take a second look.
Now maybe, listen, I'll tell them maybe they're using a VPN. How can we figure out whether they're using a VPN to access the pod?
I know a guy who
Yeah.
can help us.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's get deep. Let's get into it. Let's go deep. Next week, we're going to be back 2 episodes on the beginning of Era 2 of American Music Club, the beautiful, the heartbreaking, the atmospheric Everclear, produced by Bruce Catlin and the band. Such a big step forward. I think I cannot wait to cover this album. It is one of my favorites, if not my favorite.
Now, this is going to either impress or offend you, depending on what type of music connoisseur you may be. But Everclear was rated by Rolling Stone magazine as one of the top albums of 1991.
Yeah.
Do with that what you will.
Yeah, but Everclear has also equally, we'll talk about this more, but there are some pretty scathing reviews of Everclear from the more indie-oriented press who had been in love with American Music Club kind of throughout the career. You know, it also gets some hate for being kind of an overproduced, you know, there's something we'll talk about, which is Alias. There's this sense that Alias Records signed bands and then got them to make big, overproduced, reverb-drenched albums that were not very good. I absolutely disagree with that. I think that the next album is a masterstroke, but I can't wait to talk about it.
Oh, we're gonna fucking throw down with fucking Everclear haters out there. You better watch out because we're coming for you.
That's right. So please get in touch with us. Why don't you? You can get in touch with us in so many ways. We made it so easy. Just open your goddamn phone, go to Instagram. We're at Backtracking Rocks.
We're in the era of the internet. It's instantaneous. You can get in touch with us immediately. As soon as you hear this, you can open up your email or you could get onto one of the social networks and send us a message.
Yeah, don't just stop with it. You know, you're on your Instagram. You're looking at people falling downstairs. You're looking at jiggling boobies. I don't know what you're looking at. Dislike all that. Go to Backtracking Rocks. We're going to give you all you need to know about American Music Club.
Hey, I understand. If you're not interested in being on the Instagram, if you're not interested in being on the Twitter or whatever it used to be called, you know, hey, good old-fashioned email, electronic mail.
And what's that email address, Jay William?
Backtracking Rocks, ROX at gmail.com. Now, just so you know, Google is going to read whatever it is you send to us, and then they're going to look for keywords and they're going to feed advertisements to you.
Yeah. Which, I mean, what could be better than American Music Club influenced advertising?
Yeah, you're going to get all kinds of like sweet swag and like posters and shirts and, you know, pork pie hats and just all kinds of good AMC stuff.
Yeah.
That,
AMC
Yeah.
So get in touch with us on any of those. For God's sake, hit the like button, hit the share button, and send it to your friend. Send it to your family. Send it to that girl that you've wanted to ask out but have been a little bit afraid.
When you see that subscribe button in front of you, you go into karate chop and you chop the screen. Bam!
Yeah.
You hit it. And that will subscribe you to all of the backtracking episodes and associated, you know, swag and keywords and the, you know, the algorithm and all that.
Yeah. All of it. Just get access to all of it by hitting subscribe. Do a review, 5-star review. We're not asking for, we don't have a Patreon. We don't hide anything behind a paywall. We don't have advertising in this podcast. And that is not
anything less than 5 stars. No. Like,
Yeah,
it has
that's
to
right.
be 5.
Yeah, that's right, because it's obviously a 5-star. It's a 6-star podcast, but they only offer 5. So you do a 6-star review, you take that extra star, you use it yourself. Spend that on something that you want.
You could also send their support if you send them a message and say, I think there should be a 6-star scale because I want to give Backtracking 6 stars.
I think you should do that. So listen, thank you all very much. We cannot wait to see you next week. Everclear, it is available. It's available on Spotify. Always go to the AMC Bandcamp.
Hell yeah.
But you can actually get Everclear on Spotify. You can get this one on Spotify as well, Songs of Love Live. Link is in the show notes. Everyone out there, stay safe, stay healthy, get a good night's sleep, and get ready for next week because we're going to knock your goddamn socks off.
You better believe it, mother.
All right, bye-bye.